welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you as always for tuning in. I really appreciate it as always, so thank you. Today we welcome along a very special agent guest today, and of course that is the head of JBR Creative Management, also known as JBR themselves right here. Let's take a moment to introduce JBR and their work. He is an agent, they are an agent currently in charge of JBR Creative Management, a London-based boutique agency working with creatives from all corners of the business and of course backgrounds. They're not only an agent, they've also been an actor, director, writer, designer, drag queen, producer, dramaturg, teacher, comedy booker, pub landlord, marketing manager, and of course an agent. With over 40 years in the industry, they made their West End debut at the London Coliseum in 1985, and they also have degrees from Bristol in TV and film, a PGCE from the London Met, and an MA in performance from Mountview. As well as this, they've also been a drama student magazine editor, a journalist for the First Act magazine, Musical Stages, and the Irish Tribune, and a judge on the Olivier and various other film festival panels. And if that's not enough, they've also written a book called Getting, Keeping and Working with Your Acting Agent, a book about working with your agent to create the best working relationship and building the best career together. So get your copy from Amazon today. So without further ado, JBR, hello.
Hi, Oliver. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm enjoying the brief good weather that we're having at the moment.
Yeah, it's like three good days and 9 shit days at the moment. So
Yeah, well, that's the UK for you. And
yeah,
yeah,
anyone listening not overseas, this is what we go through on a regular basis every single year. So to begin at the beginning, I suppose for you, because you've dabbled in so many different things, like I said, there, actor, director, pub landlord, drag queen, everything. So where did they all start from? The love of the arts in general, where did it come from?
um, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, so it's strange that you would ask this. Um, I think it's to do with my age and being coming through school before the national curriculum. And at a time when teachers were free to teach whatever they wanted and their particular interests. And I got so lucky at primary school. Claire O'Toole, Miss O'Toole, at my little primary school in Kilburn, who was crazy about ballet. That was her particular passion. But she was just mad about the arts in general, and she saw no hierarchy of arts. So she didn't distinguish between what we might call high art, like opera and ballet, and low art at all. And so she would just organize these mad trips for us. So by the time I was like 8 or 9, I'd been to the ballet, to the opera, to art galleries, to dance performances, to musical theatre, to Shakespeare, to circus. We'd just been to absolutely everything. And I just completely fell in love with the arts through that. I did kind of come from a musical family in that my dad had been a singer in Ireland. And when he emigrated to the UK, he tried to pursue a career as a singer, and he would work the working men's clubs, and he would go and perform Friday and Saturday nights in the pubs and clubs. But the love of opera just it came out of nowhere. It wasn't anything. Nobody in my family had ever really done this at all. But it really does kind of come down to Miss O'Toole and just introducing us to so much different art and so many different mediums at a very young age and not distinguishing. So I never kind of felt that there wasn't a place for me in an audience for a ballet, or there wasn't a place for me in the audience for opera or for musical theatre. It was just all there, and it was all a great privilege to be in London. It was all just there for us for the taking, and I just fell in love with all art forms. And I think I often say to clients when I'm interviewing them, if they'd started performing before they were 7 years old and they'd fallen in love with it by the time they were seven, we've lost them. They're in it for the long run. And I think that I always knew I was going to be in this industry. And I never really kind of considered anything else. I remember doing my GCSEs and my A levels and people trying to persuade me to do this subject or that subject. And I just wasn't interested. I just wanted to do the arts and the creative subjects. And I knew that I was going to work in this industry. And I think when you're that kind of single-minded towards it, you do have one of those crazy careers where you just take any job just to survive. And everything I've ever done, I just kind of fell into. My first job was as a stage doorkeeper at the Dominion Theatre in the West End.
Yeah.
And from there, I just, through temping for other jobs, other opportunities just fell into my lap. And I've always just kind of done that. I've always just gone with whatever is presented to me if it feels right. I've never had a plan. Uh, and so perhaps I'm wrong with this, but I don't encourage my clients to have a plan either. I encourage them very much to just accept the opportunities as they come and see where it leads them. And if it doesn't feel right, then don't go in that direction. It's
Mm.
your control, you're the driver. So always soak up the experiences. But if it doesn't feel right for you, then don't pursue them any further. Go back on the path that you think that you should be on.
Yeah.
I just think it's a really wanky quote, but the quote that we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm.
I think we are here for 80 to 90 years, and in the grand scheme of things, that's no time at all.
Yeah.
It's a blink of an eye, and I just think that we should explore and involve ourselves with as many different opportunities and different experiences as we can, some good, some bad. The idea that all experiences should be positive is just insane. You're not going to grow if you're only having positive experiences. We have to take the rough with the smooth, the lows with the highs. So I
Mm.
do think that that's why my career is as bonkers as it is, simply because I've just always embraced whatever was put in front of me and given it a go.
Yeah, well, you certainly have. There's so many things you've been involved in. I mean, we were talking earlier about just all the things you've been a part of, but you were well, you said it's publican, but for anyone who's not familiar with that phrase, it's a pub landlord. So you were a pub landlord for a while. I'd love to hear your stories.
I was. I ran a gay cabaret bar in Dalston, Stoke Newington borders before Dalston got cool. We closed just as Dalston Superstore opened. Um, and I had been immediately prior to that, I'd been working for an international beer company, as a marketing support manager. So I'd been working in the beer industry for a couple of years prior to that. But sitting behind a desk never really appealed to me.
Yeah.
I like being with people and I like working with people. So my partner at the time bought a pub and asked me if I would run it. As I'd always worked in pubs when I was at university and at school. I'd always had my weekend and holiday job had always been working in a pub. And I loved it. And so I gave up the marketing career, which by that point I wasn't enjoying that much anyway.
Mm.
And I went and ran a pub, and that's where I became a drag queen because we had no money running this pub. Everything, pubs swallow every penny that you have.
Yeah.
And we needed an entertainer on Friday and Saturday nights. And so that's how I started my drag career, just doing the Friday night slot at my pub.
Yeah. What was it? What was your name?
Misdemeanor, the Diva of Dalston.
Diva of Dalston. That's good. I mean, we were talking before you came on, is that obviously Dalston's had a big new like regeneration project now. It's very different from those days. It was funny how you said, you were walking through Dalston the other day and you went, so all these coffee shops, these bougie places, you were like, okay, that was the crack den, that was the other crack den, and that was where people got their ketamine. And like, I'm like, was it really like that?
It really was. I remember when I got my license to run that pub, you have to go and be interviewed by the local police uh, officer in the local station, and you have to go to court for to get your license approved. And when I was being interviewed by the local police, he said, now the only question I have to ask you is, what is the drug scene like in your pub? And I
Oh,
misheard, and I thought he said, what is the drag scene like?
oh no.
And I said, "Oh, it's fantastic! Every Friday and Saturday night, you should come down." And he looked at me and he said, Do you want to think about that question and give a different answer?" And I said, "What did you ask?" And he said, "The drug scene." I was like, "Ah, okay, yeah, no, we don't allow drugs in the pub." Um, but yeah, it really was. It was. Yeah, it was. We were coming off the sort of the cocaine years of the 90s, as I remember them, when everybody seemed to be on cocaine, and we were coming into the more sort of clubbing era of the early noughties. and everybody was on MDMA or LSD, and it was, yeah, it was, you could literally walk like 200 meters from the pub, and there'd be a doorway or a house that you could go into and sort yourself for the night. It was, yeah, Dalston was a very different place back then.
Wow. I mean, what kind of people did you have in there? Just in these pubs.
Um, I remember when we first took over the pub, there were seven other gay bars in the area at the time, and they all had boarded up windows and closed doors and blinds shut, and the pub that we had was on the corner, and I remember it had these huge, huge windows. And you couldn't hide anything with those windows. You could see right into the pub and everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And everybody said to us, "Oh, you'll want to get curtains to cover those, so people can't see in if you're going to be a drag bar," because it had been an old Irish pub immediately before us.
All right.
And we refused to do that. We kept the curtains open all the time, and so people would stand outside and watch the drag shows. The only time
Okay.
we closed them was when we had strippers. Um, but other than that, the cabaret acts, the drag acts, the windows, all the curtains were open and everybody could look in. And I really kind of felt it was very important to us that it was an inclusive pub, that it wasn't just a gay men's pub, and it wasn't just a pub for gay men or lesbians or whatever. And we were running trans nightclub nights way before, like, I've been around trans people like for so many years, and we used to work with a club whose name I'm not going to mention now because it's now become it's a the name that they used back then has now become a slur for the trans community, but it was a trans run nightclub, and we would work with them, and we would have trans nights at the pub. um the only thing we didn't have were women's nights. There was a lesbian pub down the road, and they had their women's nights every Thursday. But
Mm.
we had such a mix of straight, gay, bisexual, lesbian, transgender. It was a real melting pot, and I felt very strongly that that's what the pub in that particular neighborhood should be. It should be
Yeah.
welcome to absolutely everybody, even the old Irish folk that refused to leave. They were like, "No, I've been drinking here for 40 years. I don't care what you do on the stage or how you're dressed. I'm going to continue drinking my pint here every Friday."
Yeah.
And they would stay and love it. And yeah, it was a wonderful time. I loved because we lived on the same road as the pub, and I loved being part of that community and part of that what was happening at that time.
Yeah. Very inclusive. Very, very
It
inclusive.
was, yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's always been important to me to be as inclusive as I possibly can be.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if someone came to you now and said, "Look, we've got this pub. Do you want it? But you have to leave your agency career behind." What would you say?
I would say no, unfortunately. As much as I loved it, I think running a pub in 2024 is very different to running a pub in 2004.
Very different. Yeah.
And again, very different to running a pub in sort of 1994, which is probably when I started working in pubs. I wouldn't do it. I would want to run the same kind of pub with a lot of live music and a lot of cabaret and a lot of entertainment. And those things are just very, very, very expensive. And I think unless you're doing that on a large scale in a very, very commercial area like Soho or the West End, can't imagine a local community pub being able to afford to kind of operate in that way anymore. So I
Mm.
would very much say,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't do it. But
Yeah.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I also don't drink anymore.
Okay.
And so I tend not to go to pubs very much these days anyway, because of that.
Yeah, okay. No, fair enough. I suppose if any of your clients are listening now and they're thinking, "Oh, it's JBR, are they going to run off and leave us alone?" It's like, no, don't worry, guys. I'm not trying to do that. He's,
No.
they're very much here for you. Don't you worry. So yeah, just going back to the arts then. So tell me about your debut, 1985, London Coliseum.
I was very so I grew up in Kilburn. Well, I grew up in a number of places. My parents moved around quite a lot. I always joke that I think they were on the run, but they they probably wouldn't appreciate that joke. Um, but when I was born in Archway, and I was born with whooping cough, and I was very, very ill in an incubator for the first six months of my life.
Oh
And
shit.
and so when I came out, we were advised that I needed the sea air. So we moved to Clacton for a few years. And then we moved back to London and to Kilburn. And after my local primary school in Kilburn, I went to the London Oratory School in Fulham, which was probably like a step up from a comprehensive, but not quite a private school. I talk about my school days, and people are kind of baffled by it. And I admit I'm a bit baffled by it. It was run very much as if it was a private school, but it wasn't. It was an independent school. And I joined the school choir. Actually, one of the main reasons that I went to the oratory was because they had a theatre, and it was called the London Oratory School Theatre, which years later became the Lost Theatre in Stockwell, and until quite recently was one of London's best fringe theatres. But the year before I went to the oratory, they sold the theatre and they didn't have it anymore. But I did join the choir, and the school choir were asked if they would sing backstage in a production of Parsifal at English National Opera. And it was just, one small choral number standing backstage with all the other boys from my school, because it was an all boys school, and the English National Opera chorus. And I just loved it. I just had a really good time. It was really nice. It was, a half-hour little gig, a little bit of money. And for whatever reason, the wonderful man called Peter Kay, who ran the children's sort of department at English National Opera, he just kind of liked me and asked me to come back the following year and play a small role in an opera called Queen of Spades. And that was my first onstage appearance at English National Opera. And again, they liked me, and I got asked back to play a small principal role in Werther. And then from then on, I played the shepherd boy in Tosca. And then, like, my big one was probably in Nicholas Heitner's production of The Magic Flute,
All right.
which I think that they brought that back every year for 30 years. It was one of the longest running shows that they had there.
Wow.
And I was in the original cast of that as third boy Spirit. And I was there again on the very last night, 30 years later. And it was, yeah, that was a really wonderful experience. But I spent 7 years with English National Opera in a variety of roles, from onstage principal singing, like my own lines, my own solo bits, to offstage choruses, to onstage dancer, which makes everybody laugh because I can't dance, but I was enthusiastic, and pretty much all you ever needed to do at ENO was be able to waltz, which I can do. So I did about 10 different productions, I think, in a range of different roles, right through from boy soprano right up to I made my tenor debut at 18. Again, with Nicholas Heitner directing in a production of Force of Destiny. I played the recruit, which is usually played by a boy, but Nick wanted a young person whose voice had only just broken, and that was pretty much me. So I spent my first term at Bristol University traveling back to London 3 times a week to perform at ENO, and then get the last train back to Bristol. So yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful 7 years. I loved every minute of it, but yeah, I couldn't sing opera now if you paid me. I accept alcohol and cigarettes,
Yeah.
and figured that musical theatre was probably much easier for me to sing.
Yeah. But you don't drink now, so there's no chance of that.
No, no, I don't smoke either. So yeah.
Unfortunately, that is there a recording anywhere that you could share?
There isn't a recording of me at English National Opera, but there is a recording of my school putting on production of The Magic Flute,
All right.
where I played Tamino. I played the lead. And my husband, it was on VHS, and my husband got it remastered for me for my birthday a few years ago. So I have a disc version of it, which every so often I watch a few minutes of and then just like cringe.
Just get it off, get it off.
Yeah, turn it off, turn it off.
Enough. Let's watch something else, please. Um, I'm sure it's just make sure it doesn't leak on YouTube. I'm sure everyone would love to see it, but hopefully not anyway.
No.
But anyway, so I know we're slightly time is slightly against us today. I know you've got to shoot off in about an hour or so. So I don't so many things to ask you. So we'll jump straight into your work as an agent. So first of all, how did JBR Creative Management start?
I had been an agent for 5 years by that point, and I had started with a lovely company, Simon and Howe, and we had been very small at the time that I started. There were only, I think, three of us and the boss, so four in total, in a lovely little sort of very artsy, bougie little studio in Hoxton. And I started there as a musical theatre agent with a list of about 10, I think, in the beginning. And I fell in love with agenting very, very quickly, very, very quickly. And yeah, I had a wonderful time there. But after 5 years, I had worked my way up. I'd been promoted a couple of times, and I was chief operations officer by the time that I left. And the company had grown during that time as well. And I think there were, I think, probably eight or nine of us by that stage, and a lot of assistants and lots of different departments. And running that kind of took me away from what I loved about agenting, which was the one-on-one chats with clients and working with a small group of
Mm.
clients and trying to build careers for them. I felt very much like I'd lost touch with that. And in all honesty, I was completely burnt out. I was exhausted. My mother wasn't well at the time, and I was thinking that I might have to be spending quite a lot of time traveling back to Ireland to visit her. And I just kind of I knew that something had to change when I was kind of going to work in the mornings, and just it was difficult to get out of bed, and it was difficult to drag myself in, and I wasn't enjoying it. And I spoke to my boss, and I explained that I thought something had to change, and we decided I decided that the best thing would be if I left and set up my own company. And they were very supportive and very helpful in that, and that's what I did. They allowed me to leave on the um, 30th 30th of April and set up my own company on the 1st of May. There was no sort of period where I had to like not be an agent, which was wonderful. It meant I could just kind of go from one straight to the other. But then a few months later, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So it really just wasn't the time to launch my own company. But we got through it. And 5 years later, we're still here and thriving. And I hope to be thriving in the next 10 more years down the line.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. This is a good point to sort of bring up. It's a bit of a shout out to Alexa at the 98% podcast. You did a great episode with her, and another one of our mutual friends, Mildred Ewan, as well. You spoke about how one thing I found fascinating about your sort of conversation or the bits that you put into the chat was how you've sat opposite. I never heard this before, but you sat down with clients before, and they've sat there in the meeting and they've actually started crying in front of you because their agent had, for one of a better phrase, was actually bullying them, or they had been in such a difficult position they didn't want to leave their agent because they thought having no agent was not a good thing. You have to have an agent to be successful. So I just want to just talk about those two things where you've had those meetings where I didn't realize agent bullying was ever a thing, and second of all, how having no agent instead of the right agent is actually a really good thing.
On the first point, this is a difficult one to answer because one person's bullying is another person's encouragement almost,
Yeah.
and there are certain times I know in my own career when I've spoken to a client, and we've been having some difficulties with various things, and it is there's a point where you kind of have to kind of ask, do they need a push or do they need to step back?
Right.
And one of the things that I always do with all my clients is I remind them I get paid when you work. So, any advice that I give you, you have to kind of take with that bit of salt that
Mm.
I don't get paid unless you're in work. But that said, certainly during my early career, it hasn't happened so much lately, which is I find very encouraging. But certainly during my early career, I had so many meetings with clients who went on to great things, really, really wonderful things, who I had seen their work. I had seen them on stage. I'd seen them perform. I'd seen showcases in some instances where I'd been following them since drama school. And the person that sat opposite me in the meeting room was not the person that I had seen on stage. They had no confidence in themselves and no belief in their own ability. And it came down to not having the right communication with their agent, where they were able to talk about the fact that they were changing and what they wanted out of the career was changing and what they wanted out of their life was changing, and feeling that they were being pushed just to take another job or another job or another job just for the money, for the money, for the money, and that it had nothing to do with what they wanted to do or who they wanted to be creatively. Um, And there were a lot of them who were on the verge of leaving the industry because they couldn't see a place for them to be creative. All they could see was a place for them to be part of a machine that made money.
Mm,
I don't hear that quite so much these days. Perhaps I don't interview as many people as I used to when I was in the early days of agenting. But I do still hear, which upsets me, I do still hear a lot of agent bullying, a lot of agents telling clients that they can't take holidays or that they must be single-mindedly available and completely committed to performing and only performing. And I think, in my experience and my own way of working, probably biases this and colors this. I don't think I've ever met anybody that just wants to be one thing. I think everybody that I ever meet, everybody that I interview, everybody that I talk to has, as you yourself, before we even started recording this, you were telling me about other things that you do.
mm,
And I think everybody has that. Everybody has a multitude of careers inside them and dreams and aspirations. And I think for me, the best way of doing that is to just try and encourage people to live the fullest and most creative life that they possibly can. And if that doesn't fit with what I think a performing career should be, or what they think a performing career should be, then that's okay.
mm,
Because it's their career. It's up to them how they run it. And it really does upset me when I hear that people are being dropped because they're refusing to go to auditions, or they're being dropped because they've taken a holiday and they weren't available for a big casting and they refuse to come back for it, or just that they feel that they can't have a conversation with their agent about what ails them, for want of a better phrase, or how they're feeling. They can't talk to their agent about anything other than performing. And I think that makes for a very narrow performer, and I think it makes for a very narrow relationship as well.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I never heard that before. Because I mean, you want to have a good working relationship with your agent and everything, and I'm sure the rapport you have with your clients is excellent. I'm sure, but yeah, just the fact that some people have had these bad experiences, I think is quite. Yeah, I just think my first reaction was, really? Is that really a thing? And yeah, and to hear you say that in the last episode you did, and then just now, yeah, it's interesting. And that's a good lead on to, and another thing you mentioned was how, it's better off being self-represented than working with the wrong agent as well, particularly someone who doesn't get you or is in fact rude to you in any way.
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, I think if your agent is being rude to you and you're finding it difficult to communicate with them, then you would be much better off out on your own.
Mm,
Uh, I left a really good agent once, not for any particular reason. We weren't having problems, and there was no issue with communication. I just I just got back from New York, where I'd spent a summer training in physical theatre, and to come back from that and back into a relationship with my agent where I was being seen for very specific types of theatre that no longer interested me. And I knew, and we had the conversation, and I explained that I just wasn't feeling drawn to that particular area anymore. And I think you have to remember that your agent may well have signed you as a specific type of performer. And I, perhaps for that agent, I had been signed as a musical theatre performer in my, mid 30s, and it was filling a specific gap for them. Me wanting to move out of that gap may not have been what they had foreseen when they signed me. But I very much felt within myself that the career that I wanted to start carving out for myself didn't necessarily need an agent. The work that I wanted to do in physical theatre, and the way that I felt in New York, and in, studying in a very different discipline and working with actors with a very different mindset. I remember, I think about a week into the course, one of the American actors asked me, and so, you Brits, when you get a part, when you get a script, what's the first thing that you do? And I
mm,
said, "Oh, we get our highlighters and we highlight all our lines, and then we get a pencil and we start actioning and we write in our action verbs, and we block it all off and we work out all the beats." And he just went, why don't you just see how it feels in your body first? And it blew my mind.
Mm,
And every lunchtime, everybody on this course would, every lunchtime, they would dash off to do another class in viewpoints or improv or comedy or script work. And then they would come back to the physical theatre class for the afternoon. And that was very much how the actors that I was working with, how they worked. They didn't see it as I'm pursuing musical theatre, I'm pursuing Shakespeare, I'm pursuing this and only this, and I'm trained, all my training is in this. They saw themselves as creative people who were training in a vast array of disciplines and mediums. And I came back to London, and I realized that that's how I wanted to work. I didn't want to just take dance classes and singing lessons and go in for musicals anymore. I wanted to work in physical theatre and in clown and in movement theatre and in devising and in pieces that I hadn't really covered in my training at Mountview.
mm,
And I just kind of felt I didn't want to be with an agent who, because agents, we do tend to work still in quite specific ways. You know, there's the pillars of the industry, which is radio, TV, film, and stage. And I kind of felt that my career wasn't going to fit very neatly into any of those. And if I wanted to be working in a new way and in a different way, then I needed to not have the distraction of thinking that TV role could change my life, that film role could change my life.
mm,
And so I left my agent, and we had the conversation, and I explained that that's what I wanted to do, and I left, and I actually did. I had a couple of years of just having a great time, and perhaps not doing the kind of work that you would look at and go, oh, there's a progression there from understudy up to small parts, up to leading roles, or in that sense. But I very much spent the next couple of years just having an absolute ball,
yeah,
training and working in a number of different disciplines. And and I think part of me, when I came back from New York, part of me knew that that part of my journey, the sort of the musical theatre part of my journey that I'd been pursuing basically since I was 11 years old, that had come to an end. And I knew that New York was a major change for me, and it was a transition into something else. And I wouldn't be agenting if I hadn't had that experience, and kind of it opened my mind to how huge the industry is and how very small I had made it by only pursuing a career in musical theatre,
mm,
um, and what I had cut myself off to. And unfortunately, at that stage, I was pushing 40, and there's really only so much physical work you can do at that age. You're only just discovering it. But I hope that I've taken that into agenting, that the idea that the industry is vast, and actually you should not kind of look at your CV and compare it to anybody else's.
yeah,
What you should do is pursue work that makes you feel fulfilled. And I wanted to kind of do that as an agent in in a partnership with clients, so that I could say, well, look, if you want to be a West End lead, this is the path that we will try and take. But if you want to be a West End lead and do a bit of directing, then we need to kind of open up our ideas. If you want to be a West End lead, but do a lot of dance theatre or physical theatre, it's going to take you a bit longer. And I always say, and I say it in the book and I say it on every podcast, the path from A to Z takes in 24 other letters, and you actually end up at number five anyway. It's like it's you're doing this all through your career. And I think that's how you build a long-lasting career, how you're still doing it at 90.
mm,
Look at people like Judi Dench and people like that, and I think your career has been so varied and so versatile. Bit of film, bit of radio, bit of commercial, bit of sitcom, bit of comedy, bit of Shakespeare, bit of this, bit of that, bit of the other.
mm,
And I think that's how you build a long lasting career. And that's certainly what I want to carve out for my clients. I want them to have a career that they feel proud of, that may not necessarily be a career that other people can look at a CV and go, wow, you're a big star, you're wow, you're famous. And I want them to kind of go acknowledge the experiences that they are having along the way.
mm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think on my journey, a few years ago, I just thought I was only an actor. I was only an actor. I can't do anything else. But, having doing this podcast and everything is something that happened by accident. And it just it's something I've actually really enjoyed doing, like having these conversations with yourself, and just hearing about all these stories and also things about the industry which I didn't know about as well. And it's helping me not only fuel my process of being an actor, but also my awareness of the business and what's out there in a way. And I wouldn't have it if it wasn't for this. And I've also dabbled with writing as well. If you asked me like 5 years ago, do you want to be a writer? I'd be like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. But actually, now I'm starting to discover writing. I'm writing stuff at the moment, and I'm really enjoying it. Like you create your own little universe of characters, or one character, or whatever it is. You have the power to do that, bringing your life experiences into the business, which of course art is all about reflecting life back at you. I think what did Oscar Wilde say? He said, I love the theatres. I regard the theatre as the greatest of art forms because it shows a human being exactly what it is to be a human being, or something like that. And that quote's always stuck with me, and that's brilliant. So just continuing with your agent stuff here, one question I had for you was, I think I asked Mildred this as well. What are kind of the do's and don'ts of working with an agent?
There aren't any. I'll be really honest. People always ask that, and I always think it would be really arrogant of me to say, "Oh, this is what you shouldn't do." And one day I did kind of write a list of things that annoy me or things that irritate me that I wish actors wouldn't do. And I looked at the list and I thought, I've done all of them myself. So it would be hypocritical of me to say, here are the things you shouldn't do, because it's just personal preference.
Yeah,
Um, but what I would love is if drama schools or training providers taught more about the business side of things. And I don't mean
yeah,
about how to write to an agent or how to, write to a casting director and what the difference is between writing to an agent and writing to a casting director, or how to manage your money. Or I don't mean that side of it. I just mean, and I was talking to another agent about this the other day. This is just an example, but there's a massive difference between what the industry and the media calls an unknown actor and what actors call an unknown actor. And you'll see it. You'll see reports in the Guardian or saying such and such an actor was discovered, was an unknown and was discovered. And you read it, and they were discovered in a leading role at the Almeida after a 10-year career of pretty decent leading roles with a bit at the National and a bit at the RSC. And whereas actors think an unknown actor is somebody plucked straight from drama school and turned into a star, or somebody with no experience who's just passed off the street.
mm,
And I wish that there was more sort of understanding of the work that needs to go into it, and the time that it takes.
yes,
I was reading a philosophy book the other day that was saying sort of post 2000, we've all become obsessed with speed. And a part of it is the internet. We can get everything so fast these days. I can order a book off Amazon in the morning and it arrives by 10 p.m. that night. And we are obsessed with speed and speed. But actually, very little has really changed about the world. It may be that we can get things faster, but very little has changed about how we as human beings develop. We still develop at the same speed. It still takes the time that it takes. And the actors on my books who are doing the best and working the most and getting called in time and time again by top casting directors are the ones who have been with me for my entire journey as an agent. They're
yeah,
the ones who've been with me for 10 years,
wow,
or certainly, the ones who were with me right at the start of JBR Creative Management for 5 years. The longer my clients are with me, the better it gets for both of us. And I always say when I'm interviewing new clients, and particularly graduates, I always say I don't expect anything to happen for at least 2 years. I think the first 2 years are about trying to get you seen, and you going into different rooms and working out what mediums you like and who you like and who you want to work with. But I don't expect you to book a job. It'd be lovely if you did, but I don't expect you to book a job for the first couple of years. Um, and then things don't really get interesting until about year 7. And so many people seem disappointed by that. And I sometimes will ask in interviews, what would be a good first year for you out of drama school? What would you like to achieve in your first year? And the people that I'm most drawn to are the people that just kind of say, I'd like to audition as much as possible. Um, the ones that kind of it seems very marked to me, this whole obsession with speed thing. When people say they want to do a West End show and some TV and a small part in a film and maybe a
Everything.
print and a regional tour in a year. And I'm just like, well, the West End job would take care of that year for you, and there would be very little else that you could do during that time.
Yeah.
It just seems unrealistic to me. It seems unrealistic that people expect to go straight into leading roles. That happens to a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of people. Most people go into ensembles or to understudying and work their way up. It is still about relationships. It's still about building those relationships, and that takes time. You might have to audition for Pippa Alien's office 2 or 3 times before they kind of go, this person should be called in for absolutely everything because they auditioned brilliantly and they're such a lovely person. And you want casting directors to root for you. There was a
Yeah.
wonderful article in The Guardian recently about the craft of casting. And I found it so beautiful and so fascinating because it talked about how casting directors root for actors. And that's what we want. We want a casting director to go, I loved them. They weren't right for this, but I loved them. So I'm going to call them in for the next project, and then the next one, and the next one. And when you walk out of the audition, they're the people saying, do you know what? I've been following them for 3 or 4 years and they just get better and better and better. It's their time now. Give them a chance now. And that's what you want. And people think that it all boils down to what you do in the room, that you walk in, you give your audition, and that's what cinches it for you. And it's very rarely that. It's usually that somebody has seen your work before, or the casting director is pushing you, or your agent knows and understands what you can do. And that all takes time. It takes
Mm.
time to build up those relationships and get those people on your side and get those people talking about you in rooms that you can't even imagine that they're talking about you. That happens so often. I get clients, I send them an audition and they text me and say, oh my God, Nina Gold is seeing me for this, or oh my God, you've got me an audition for the RSC. How? And it's like, it's not me, it's you. You're being talked about, you're being spoken about as somebody who auditions really well, who does really good work, who's a wonderful company member. And people notice that, and they want casting directors in particular, they want actors to fulfill their potential and be brilliant. I would never want an actor to think of a casting director as a gatekeeper. I
Mm.
always say that that's not what they're doing. They're redirecting. Rejection is redirection. And if they're saying no, not this time, they're saying you need to go away and get a bit stronger vocally, or get a bit stronger as an actress, or just get a bit stronger as a person. But
Yeah.
right now, it's not safe for you to go on. This wouldn't be the right job for you. It might damage you in ways that you can't even imagine right now. Rejection is just a redirection to look in a different area and see what you can improve, which is why
Yeah.
I always ask my clients after an audition. I don't say how did it go because I'm not that interested in how it went, because an actor's view of how it went is so rarely in concordance with how the casting director has seen it. I remember a client asking me to apologize to a casting director, and I said I'm not going to do that. And they said, "Oh, please, please do." I was so embarrassed; it was humiliating. I've never been so bad in my life. And I rang the casting director, and I was about to say they would like to apologize. They really felt that they did really badly, and they said, oh, I was just about to call you. We absolutely loved them. We want them for a recall. So now I ask my clients, what did you learn? Because I think 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get through to the next round of an audition. You're not going to book that role.
Mm.
And I think if you can always see it as a learning experience, it's much more useful than just kind of reflecting on how you think it went, kind of going, well, I think it went brilliantly, but I probably shouldn't have eaten garlic before I went in because I was a bit uncomfortable about my breath, or I maybe should have worn a different pair of trousers because they were a bit tight, or it's little stuff like that. What did you learn from that experience, and
Yeah.
how is it going to help you with the next one?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it reminds me of one of Simon Sinek's sort of famous speeches. He talks about how it's like if you want something, you go on Amazon, it arrives the next day. You know, if you want to get a date, you go on Tinder, swipe right, bang, I'm a stud. I've just swiped right. But, you know, and we live in a world of, I think he calls it instant gratification, except for job satisfaction and strength of relationships. There's no app for that, you know, and he talks about how he meets all these kids who have just left university, and he's like, "Oh, how's your job going?" It's like, "I think I'm going to quit." It's like, "Why?" And they go, "Well, I'm just not making an impact." So you've been out of school for 8 months. It's like there's that you can't, and like you said there, it's like until year seven, that's when things start happening. And it's not to say something could happen in the meantime, but to sort of build it up and build it up and build up to where you are there is something else. Yeah, that's great.
Saw an interview that Viola Davis did recently, and
Yeah,
she said beauty has absolutely nothing to do with acting. Absolutely nothing to do with acting, but it has a lot to do with celebrity. And I do think in this day of social media and Instagram and the way that we tweak our lives to make them look amazing and glossy and super
yeah,
stylish and as if we're all having an incredible time all the time, that is a knockoff from celebrity culture.
yeah.
Uh, and I ask this a lot when I'm teaching at drama schools. Do you want to work on celebrity or do you want to work on craft? Because one of them is going to make you a great actor, and the other one is going to make you famous. And some people, there is nothing wrong with wanting to be famous,
Mm,
nothing wrong with it at all. But for most people, fame is a byproduct of being a good actor. And for most people, and certainly most people that I've spoken to, they would really rather not have the fame. They would really rather just have, be thought of as a great actor. But unfortunately, celebrity these days, it goes hand in hand with that. And I
mm.
think we have to be very, very careful about working on celebrity rather than working on craft.
Yeah, I think it's good because I think you want to come from. Probably speaking for myself here, maybe others as well. But I think if to be a good actor, that resonates from my soul. Whereas if I want to be a celebrity, that comes from ego. And would you rather have ego or soul? And I pick soul every single time,
Yeah.
because yeah, that's not me. I don't want to do that. But yeah, it's interesting that how you work with all these people. I know you've got just a few more minutes, and then we've got to sort of finish. Um, but I'm just curious, what's been some of the stories of working with your clients? You don't have to give names or everything, but someone who you took on who just you saw this journey from someone who's probably shy about walking in the room to where they are now, where they can just fly into a room and just go, "This audition's mine. I don't care if I get it or not, but I'm just gonna give it my best shot." So have you had stories like that, experiences?
Oh, I do. I do, but I would feel it arrogant of me to kind of take any sort of credit for anyone's career. And I
But
do,
you've been their mentor. You've helped them through it.
yeah, but if they don't believe in it themselves, I can't force somebody to believe in themselves.
Hmm.
And I just think it's a little bit like being a parent. You just give time and space and love, unconditional love. Um, And I always say to my clients, you don't see me when I put the phone down. I can spend an hour and a half on the phone to you, talking through all your problems and telling you how wonderful you are. And you don't see me putting the phone down and going, oh my God, every week they need this pep talk. All they need to know is that in that hour and a half, I am absolutely 100% there for them, listening to them and trying to build them up. But it is incredible when you see that happen. It is, and there are a couple of people that immediately I look at their careers and I think to myself, I saw that in you at the beginning. Um, and I'm so honestly so thrilled and proud and happy that I know myself that I was part of that journey. Um, and I am very, very privileged in that most of my clients, ex-clients, or when we stop working with each other for whatever reason, most of them stay in touch. I've been to weddings of ex-clients, parties, and I'm always so thrilled when they come up to me at a press night and talk to me at a press night because some of these people are incredibly busy at these press nights. They've got photographers and they've got their new agent working with them and it moves me so much to know that I was part of that journey for them.
Mm,
Um, but I would never ever want to kind of go, oh, you wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for me, because it's not true.
mm,
Um, I'm not the person in the room. I might be the person that picks up the pieces after you've come out of the room, or the person that was bigging you up in the 5 minutes before you went into the room. But what you do in that room to get your job, that's all you. And if I could be part of that and in some small way, then that's wonderful, and that's why I love agenting. But it's certainly not. And it is a gift to kind of, and a privilege to kind of look at somebody's career and go, wow, I saw that. I saw that you had the possibility of that. I say it in the book that, a good agent, believes in you and encourages you and gets you on. A great agent sees in you something that you didn't even see in yourself.
Mm.
And I think when you do see that in yourself, that is when an agent can kind of step back and go, fly, just
Yeah,
be.
off
And
you
that
go.
it's wonderful when you see somebody step into their power and step into an understanding that all they have to do is be themselves, and that's enough.
Mm.
Too many people, too many, and I did it myself for all my years as an actor. They try to be what they think the casting director wants or the
Mm.
director wants. They come into a room and they try, in those few seconds, they try to interpret the signals that they're getting. They try to be what they think you're looking for. And actually, we're looking for the person that comes in and says, I have no idea what you're looking for. This is who I am. And if this fits, if this works, brilliant. But if it doesn't, that's okay.
Yeah.
Too many people are just like, what can I do to make you want me, to make you like me, to make you hire me?
Mm.
And that very rarely works.
Yeah.
It's more, and you said it yourself, it's more the people that just walk in, bish, bash, bosh, they know who they are, they know what they're doing, they do it and they get out. Those are the ones that we really kind of go, wow, that person knows who they are.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned about how just I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, it'll come back in a second. I'm sure it'll find its way back in a minute. Just very quickly, you've probably answered this already, but I'm just going to just throw this out there. But is there anything about being an agent specifically that you wish that people, who are on your books and not on your books, or people trying to get agents, etc. Is there anything about the job which you feel like isn't talked about enough? Is there some things about this job which you wish that other people knew about, whether they're represented or not?
Yeah, and I talked about this on the 98%. It's like I run my own company. I work for myself. My husband works with me. We haven't had a holiday in 10 years, and when you are working for yourself, you can't take time off. We couldn't jet off to, Spain or France for a week and just turn off the phones and the laptops. There's nobody else that can do what we do for our
Mm.
clients. When we're ill, I work from bed. When I had COVID recently and I worked from bed and I felt like death warmed up, but there's no kind of going onto Twitter and saying, I'm not working today, folks. I'm not well, because your clients would just like panic. Like who's subbing me? Who's dealing with invoices? Who's reading my contracts? And I think that part of it, particularly for the smaller, the boutique, the mid-sized agencies, there's a feeling that we are run in the same way as the big ones, that we have an assistant who can take over when we're sick. We get 4 weeks holiday a year. And we don't. And one of the other agents on that podcast was saying that she worked from a hospital bed when she was ill.
Oh
And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that, and a lot of my clients listened to that podcast, and I got a lot of messages afterwards just saying, I never realized that. I never realized you haven't had a holiday. I never realized you have to work when you're sick. I never realized that you and your husband can't go away anywhere together. Um, and I feel that was eye-opening for some of my clients who just assume that I have an assistant or that I can get somebody in to run it. And it's just that. It's just I think, and I think that would boil down to just remember that your agent is also a human being who
yeah,
gets ill and who has bad days and who has a dog that is sick and needs to be taken to the vet and can't answer your call immediately. It's just remembering that we are people, not a building.
yeah. I think there was as the story I've told on previous episodes actually, so this to Mildred as well and Claire Loy. We had an agent come to see us at drama school, and she was talking about pretty what we're doing now. This is the best way to email us, talk about this, send us links to your show reel, blah 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 blah. And she said, also just what's the baseline of all of it. And I think one thing that was what I was going to say earlier is that just being nice goes a long way. All these other people, they talk to others. And I think another episode of the 98% was they had Tony Gardner on, and he simply just said, look, one of the best ways to be in this business and to work really hard is put your head down, work hard, and don't be a cunt. And you know, And that's all of it really.
I love
But
Tony. I can hear him say that. I love him. He's brilliant.
yeah, oh, he's brilliant. Yeah, I watched him in My Parents as Our Aliens as kids. And I'd love to get him on. But
My
yeah,
husband rivals with him, and
did he?
yeah, in the West End. Yeah, had a great time. He's a cracking fella.
He really is. Yeah, big shout out to Tony. But yeah, so with this client apparently rang her up, and she was pregnant with one of her kids at the time, and I don't know why this person said this, but she said this guy said, "Oh, I've just heard that you're pregnant." She went, "Yeah. Well, I guess that means you're going to spend more time with your kid than you are on your clients."
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And it's
Wow.
like, what did you just say? And then she followed that. There's just the stunned silence in the room. And then after she went, and guess what? I went, what? That person hasn't worked since. And we went, yeah, too right, too right. And ultimately, like you said, that you and your husband haven't been away for 10 years and you're working from bed, and the other agent, I'm sorry if you're listening, I've forgotten your name. You know, just understand that you are human beings as well. You want to have time off, but unfortunately the phone keeps ringing. You want to shut your laptop down, but the email inbox keeps going bup, 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 the whole time. But yeah, just being nice in this business goes a heck of a long way, and it's definitely underestimated a lot. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think being nice will take you, and there's a lot of like, oh, good guys finish last,
Uh,
but it's not true.
no.
People, I've been in casting rooms where it's come down to actor A or actor B, and the team have gone, actor B is lovely to work with. And that's it. And
Mm,
that person gets the job, that one doesn't. Most honestly, I'd love it if everybody was a unique, incredibly, exceptionally talented individual. But the truth is,
mm,
we're all interchangeable. There's a handful of actors that nobody else can do what they do. And they tend to be at the very, very top of their game. Bit further down, everybody's replaceable. You could stand in Soho and chuck a stone, and you'd probably find 50 people that could replace you on stage any day. And most of us are replaceable. So be the person. If your superpower is anything, make your superpower being nice, being
yeah.
a lovely person to get on with, and a lovely person to have in a rehearsal room, and a lovely person to be out on bloody tour with. A
Mm.
director of mine years ago once said to me, I do the van test when I audition people. I always think, could I bear to be stuck in a van with this person for 5 months on tour? And if the answer is no, you don't get the part. I don't care how talented you are.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
important because we create families in those rooms.
Oh, you do. You do.
And the great thing about acting is you can leave that family after a year. You can go away and do something else and create another family. So you're not marrying into it for your whole life. But the way to have lots and lots of those families is to just be the member of the family that everybody wants to invite to parties. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to, horrible Uncle Tom who like nobody really likes but has to be there because he's
Yeah. Yeah.
just bloody nice, honestly.
Yeah, just ask questions. How was your day? How are you?
Yeah.
How was your family? How was your mum?
Just always start with that. It always makes me laugh that if people know that I'm under the weather, they will ring and they'll be like, "Oh, I've heard you're not well." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling great." And they're like, "Oh, I hope you get better soon. Have you had a chance to look at my new headshots?" But at least they're starting with it. At least they're
Yeah.
leading with it.
Yeah. How do you feel about those calls? It's like, okay, yeah, I will. Fuck off. Or is it just like
Like I say, they can't see me when I put the phone down. So those calls are part of the job, and I signed up to do this job, and I love this job, and I was that actor on the other end of the phone, and I get it. Your career is the most important thing to you. Your agent's health is probably much lower down on the list of things that are important. So yeah, I understand that. I've been that person, and I'm not going to. Don't ring me to spend half an hour talking to me about my health. You have something that you need doing, let me know, tell me. And
Yeah.
it may annoy me and it may not be what I want to hear right now because I'm not feeling great, but I'll put it on my list and I know that it needs to be done
Yeah.
because my job is to manage your career. So yeah, you
Yeah.
take the rough with the smooth in all of it.
Yeah. I'll get back to you in 3 to 5 working days.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What? No, you need to know now." Um, cool. Just got three more questions for you, Jay. So first one is for anyone out there who's listening to this who actually is thinking about becoming an agent themselves, and of course you've talked a lot about the job and the person when you put the phone down, etc. What advice would you give to aspiring agents who may be listening and watching?
I think if you want to become an agent because you think you're going to make a load of money, then move to Hollywood and become an agent in Hollywood. Um, but I do think when I became an agent and I told people, everyone said, "Oh, that makes so much sense. That you should become an agent is absolutely it's like a penny dropping. It absolutely makes sense
Yeah.
because." And I always joke about it and say, "I love telling other people what to do, and I have great taste." And I think those were my two skills as an agent. But I did at drama school. I was always the person that people would come to ask about advice on auditioning or how to write to somebody or what songs that would worked better for Oliver as opposed to Grease. And I was always that person. And even in my acting career, I loved putting people together. That was one of the things that I loved so much about being an actor, that I got to meet so many different people. And I'd be at parties and somebody would say, "I'm really struggling to find a violinist who can speak Welsh." And I'd go, "Oh God, I met one a couple of weeks ago. Let me let me give you their number and hook you up." And I loved doing that. So it just seemed so natural to me that I would, graduate towards a job that would pay me to do that. Um, and I think the best thing that you can do if you want to be an agent is go and work for an agent for a while. And I know that some of the big agencies, they do terrific intern schemes where you can go and spend a summer getting paid and shadow lots and lots of different departments. And other agencies will advertise on the PMA or in various websites looking for an assistant. I think starting as an assistant is a great way to go. But then again, I went straight in as an agent. I didn't start as an assistant. I learned everything that I know about agenting on the job by doing it and by making mistakes. And I was very lucky that Sam and Simon at Simon and Howe were able to kind of hold me through those mistakes. There were
Mm,
many tears and many times that Sam would come and put her hand on my shoulder just to calm me down when I was on the phone to somebody.
mm,
And there are as many different routes into agenting as there are routes into acting. So see what works for you. But I do think going and shadowing an agent for a while, and I think if you can do it in one of the big agencies, so much the better, because you may think that you want to be an actor's agent, but actually you're much more drawn to being a presenter's agent or a literary agent. And I think learning in those big departments where you can move around and shadow lots of different people could be really helpful for most people. But yeah, if like acting, if you're coming into it thinking you're going to make a lot of money out of film stars and so on, then think again.
mm,
It's hard work, it's long hours, and you have to love it. You have to love going to the theatre. You have to love watching films. You have to love listening to audiobooks and radio plays and all the things that we need to do. You have to enjoy that
mm,
because there's a lot of it.
mm. Yeah, brilliant stuff. And I suppose really that's the second to last question is sort of tying into what you were saying there. But what would you say was a piece of advice someone had told you specifically at the right at the beginning of your career?
My career as an actor or my career as an agent?
I suppose really, well, both, if you want.
Nick Heitner taught me to always be on time and to be nice. That was and I learned the always be on time lesson. I learned the hard way when I was late for the half once and didn't get to go on, which is really tough for like a 12-year-old to be told, no, you don't get to go
Yeah.
on. But I learned my lesson. And when I became an agent, my friend Con O'Neill, who's a terrific actor, he said to me, be the agent that hates the industry but loves actors. And I've always tried to do that. I have massive problems with this industry and how it is run and how it is organized and the structure of it and the hierarchy of it all. But I love actors. So yeah, I've always remembered that. Be the agent that loves actors but hates the industry.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
A whole conversation.
We'll get on to that soon. And finally, today, what would you say was an experience or experiences you've had in your career, actor, agent, everything that you've done that you're never ever going to forget?
Do you know what? It's nothing to do with acting or agenting. It was my first. like job after university, after Bristol, when I was a stage doorkeeper, and I worked on three Royal Variety performances as
Oh,
stage
wow.
doorkeeper. And just like if you watch the Royal Variety, all those stars and that you see, imagine them all coming through a tiny stage door and having to be signed in by me. So it's like Elaine Page, Lionel Richie, Olivia Newton-John, Cliff Richard, and on and on and on. And I think my greatest memory of that period is serving champagne to Frank Bruno, Des O'Connor, Joan Rivers, Linda Robson, and Pauline Quirk, the Birds of a Feather,
Wow.
and and I can't. I'd have to like think about who else was in there, and I spilled the entire glass of champagne, the entire tray of champagne on Frank Bruno, the boxer, and it was
Oh,
just
God.
one of those moments of just absolute silence fell, and then Joan Rivers said something, and everybody just wet themselves laughing. But I really, for a second, I thought Frank Bruno was going to just knock me out. It's those. It's exactly what I mean. It's the experiences that, and it's not even remotely funny to me that I don't remember like that. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Not the first curtain call that I took at English National Opera. Not any award that I was nominated for. None of that. None of that. It's that one silly little moment of me being surrounded by like icons of this industry, and that's what I remember. And I think that's what I would encourage my clients to have. The jobs come and go. The memories that you take from this career, that's what's going to last you forever. And they
Mm.
will come to you in unexpected places. It's very rarely that the moment that you think is going to matter that is actually the one that you remember.
Yeah. Amen to that. Um, Jay, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you very much for your time. I've still got
Thank you for
so
having me.
yeah, no, I've got still so many more things to ask you, but I'd love to have you back. We'd love to do
Sure,
another
no
one.
problem at all.
And yeah, honestly, brilliant. Thank you for your time. I know you got to shoot off now, but yeah, this has been fantastic, and I've really loved having you on. So thank you very much. And I think that's a good point to end. So, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very, very soon. If you just hang on, Jay, we'll do a little debrief afterwards after I finish the recording. So yeah. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you all very, very soon. And Jay, thank you so much.
Thank you.